It's pretty common nowadays to see a large company like Samsung be targeted by other companies when it comes to their flagship smartphone devices, trying to dethrone the Galaxy. But this time it's by a smaller company whose first flagship device outing really tries to take the crown of most affordable phone for all of the power that it provides. Hey, it's Josh Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And here is a look at the OnePlus One versus the Samsung Galaxy S5. Whereas we have a somewhat fresh look at a flagship smartphone from OnePlus, the terms Samsung and Galaxy are so familiar that they tend to make you think of specific design choices. The S5 essentially looks like its predecessors, putting rounded corners on a plastic body, and the same button layout we've come to expect returns with the tactile home button and the back and now recent apps keys flanking it. The buttons line the sides, and the bottom has a cover for the micro USB charging slot, which is a nuisance to use but does help the phone's IP certification. It's on the back that we find a change, as the removable back houses the addition of a heart rate monitor, but is now made up of a perforated or dimpled plastic. This is perhaps the most polarizing design choice, and to us, it's not really a step forward for Samsung's design language overall. OnePlus looked to create a phone that was elegant but also kept it simple. You don't get many extra features like a removable battery or expandable storage like found in the removable backing of the S5. The shell of the OnePlus One is removable and replaceable with different materials soon to make it to the OnePlus store. But nonetheless, this large device sporting a 5.5-inch screen, a silver lining around the front panel, a sandstone sandpaper-like material for the back of this version of the phone, and a typical button layout. Size really dictates much of this part of the battle. Though the now larger bezel of the Galaxy S5 helps make it somewhat closer to the size of the One, the OnePlus behemoth is still a tougher device to work with in one hand. The 5.1-inch screen of the Galaxy S5 doesn't really blow up the S5 too much compared to its predecessors. And as far as looks go, it depends on your tastes, though we will say that the S5 doesn't feel like too much of a step forward in terms of its aesthetics. To its credit, however, the S5 will survive more due to its IP certification. On the other hand, anyone preferring simplicity will find it with the OnePlus One, just in a pretty large package. Samsung's Super AMOLED technology once again goes up against the competition, and in this case it is the 5.5-inch LTPS performer of the One. The S5 has all the typical benefits of the display tech, providing high contrast between the colors that are all incredibly vivid, to some perhaps too vivid, but that saturation can be toned down if truly needed. The larger screen of the OnePlus One is a great color producer in its own right, and having more real estate can make media even more fun to consume, like with video games or movies. Viewing web pages or reading text won't be an issue either way with pixel densities of over 400 in either device. While size will be a big factor in your choice here, once again, we will admit that the high saturation and contrast of the Super AMOLED screen does make the viewing experience of the S5 really enjoyable. And it's in performance that we see a pretty even playing field, with both phones sporting the Snapdragon 801 and the Adreno 330 with 2GB of RAM. There's no doubting how great the performance packages are, and thus it is up to the optimizations of the software to provide a great experience. OnePlus gets the advantage with Cyanogen Mod, the high-powered version that takes inspiration from stock Android and is a snappy time all around. The Galaxy S5, on the other hand, has TouchWiz, which often gets a bad rap for being too robust for its own good, and thus suffering from some lag. Thankfully, TouchWiz this time has been getting its improvements in recent years, and the S5 provides a pretty good example of that. Lag is thankfully pretty minimal, with the only real instances coming when the operating system has to load multiple elements altogether, like in the My Magazine. But ultimately, there is speed to be had in either device, no matter which flavor of Android you end up choosing. If there's one thing that Samsung has always tried to do, it's pack as much as possible into their smartphones, and that shows in the hardware aspect. The S5 comes with the kind of tropes power users usually want: a removable battery, expandable storage, all connectivity options including an IR blaster, and sensors for various gestures you may or may not use. But on top of all of this are two main additions of the heart rate monitor and the fingerprint scanner embedded into the large home button. In my time with the S5 though, I found both of these features to not really add that much value. The HRM is far from an ideal tool for anyone truly into fitness, though it could come in handy maybe just once in a while. And the finger scanner, though it does add some extra security to the phone, is not an ideal tool for anyone that prefers faster unlocking of their phones. The One, on the other hand, provides the essentials and not too much more. The battery doesn't allow for the removable battery or expandable storage, but it packs pretty much every core connectivity tool. Where the One does shine is in providing as much as it can for an affordable price. For a good price, you can get the version of the OnePlus One with 64GB of onboard storage, which should be plenty for all but the most power-hungry users. Battery life on either device fared quite well, though the Galaxy S5 does come with some robust choices for power saving. And by making the right choices on the S5, you could really make it go above and beyond, especially with the ability to replace that battery if you need to. A new 16-megapixel camera in the Galaxy S5 looks to improve the smartphone photography game, while the 13-megapixel shooter of the OnePlus One takes the conventional camera experience but throws a lot of features into it. The Galaxy S5 did away with all the different modes you may or may not have used from the S4 and put in plenty of replacements, most of which proved kind of useful, like the Live HDR and the selective focus modes. And while these modes might not always work perfectly, they certainly helped make photos pop when they did. Throw under that a ton of other options for catering the shot to one's liking, and we have a pretty powerful ISO camera that took some pretty great photos, furthering Samsung's prowess in this particular aspect. The OnePlus One, on the other hand, takes on the 13-megapixel optics package, but its software brings a lot to the table. Swipe up and down on the interface and you'll see all the different modes and filters to really make the shot what you want it to be. There are quite a few options underneath as well, even the ability to choose what video codec you want to use for video capture. The One provided very clean shots, providing a great experience that was at once pretty easy to use and pretty powerful. And when it comes to choosing either camera, it really depends on what kind of scene production you want. Samsung often puts quite a bit of saturation into the photos their phones produce, and the ISOCELL Performer is no exception. You don't get quite as much saturation in the colors of the OnePlus One, but its sharpness level is still on par, though the 16 megapixels of the S5 might make it the better choice for cropping down images. And finally, in software, both Samsung and OnePlus took very different routes to create their flavors of Android. We'll start with Samsung and its long-running TouchWiz interface. It's gotten a bit of a makeover and does look a bit cleaner. And when it comes to general functionality, TouchWiz has always been chock full of different features. Everything from navigation gestures to the multi-window, to even a toolbox for easily accessing a number of used applications. While those features might be useful and pretty welcome, others aren't quite as much. The My Magazine in particular is too curated and doesn't provide enough freedom to cater the newsfeed. Otherwise, it's a pretty familiar experience for any Android user. The Recent Apps button brings a familiar multitasking experience, and for all TouchWiz provides that you may or may not use, it's not hard to get the common and daily tasks done in no time. OnePlus, on the other hand, employed the help of the powerful custom ROM team CyanogenMod to bring an experience that is much like the stock Android build put on steroids. On the surface, it looks like Android KitKat, but go underneath the surface and you'll find a lot of customization options like in the theme showcase, and even options to tweak the button layouts to your liking. Cyanogen flavored tools like the Gallery app, and the features that you can only get on a custom-built operating system, like for example a native screen recorder, sweeten the pot. For many users, custom ROMs bring features that users could only wish the simplistically elegant stock Android interface had, and in the OnePlus One, CM has been given that spotlight. So when it comes to choosing which software is for you, it's all about choice. Samsung might have you with its flavor of Android replete with multitasking tools and a fingerprint scanner if that's really what you need. Or the OnePlus can bring you a great looking Android build that, if that is ultimately the look you're going for, can be catered exactly to the way that you want it otherwise. Though the Galaxy S5 can easily be had on contracts throughout every carrier pretty much anywhere by now, the OnePlus One is still a little tough for the masses to get their hands on. That being said, the power of the One does run a lot cheaper unlocked at $299 for the base model and $349 for the 64GB version used in this comparison. And so, there you have it. Two giants going at it. The giant that is Samsung, the giant company with a very colorful history of successful smartphone releases, and then the first giant release by a relatively new company that tried to make one of the most powerfully affordable phones yet. In a way, both of these phones succeed at exactly what they wanted to do. Samsung continues its smartphone pedigree while OnePlus made a big splash with their much sought after device, especially considering its price. It might be some time before the OnePlus One is available widely and without going through hoops. But I think that when that time comes, anyone willing to put in a bit of effort will flock to it. On the other hand, no one can count out Samsung, and the Galaxy S5 is the most feature-packed phone they have ever released. You can't go wrong with the Galaxy S5 simply because Samsung has proved the worth of the Galaxy. But if you are looking for something different or fresh, then maybe the alternative would definitely be the One. As always, thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this comparison of the OnePlus One and then this time the Samsung Galaxy S5. The Galaxy S5 is of course the behemoth in the smartphone space, but OnePlus has definitely made a splash with their flagship device, providing a experience that is not only affordably priced but is still very powerful despite it, and it can essentially be a good contender to the Galaxy S5. Ultimately, the choice is up to you, so keep it tuned here to watch all of the coverage of both of these phones, including our full reviews, which you can see right over on the side. And also don't forget to check out the content from my colleagues in Android, Joe, Jace, Kevin the Tech Ninja, and Lon. After that, drop us some likes on our videos, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, once you're done with all of that, head on over to androidauthority.com because we are your source for all things Android.